Jared left the doctor's office in a bad mood. What do his words that there's no improvement yet mean? But when will they start? Have I poured so much money into this treatment for nothing? I've ruined my business with these treatments. And the competitors are not dormant, they're just waiting to step on my toes. It's understandable. In our circle, weakness is not honoured. A weak man is unreliable in business, like a lost traveller wandering through the swamp. My mother was right. There's nothing to do in this city. And I was in a hurry. I was afraid that I would not have time, and I left everything in vain, thought Jared, leaving the clinic. His mood was at rock bottom, compounded by his weakness and dizziness. Probably it's not worth driving in this state. Should I hire a personal driver? But where would I go? That would just be another expense, Jared thought on his way home. He did not get behind the wheel of his old car, because life was not so disgusting that he wanted to go to the end of the world. His business partner, Victor, used to say, "You need a break, Jared. Breathe some fresh air, get some sleep, have village milk in the morning and enjoy the birds singing and the smell of freshly cut grass in the afternoon." Ah, that would be perfect. Well, when you're healthy, the countryside is beautiful. But when you don't know how long you have left, you start to think differently. Jared always answered on such words. Trying to dispel unpleasant memories, Jared shook his head, nearly losing his balance due to weakness. He stopped, steadying himself on a lamppost. Passers-by cautiously navigated around him, assuming he was intoxicated. However, Jared hadn't had a drink for over 2 months, since he found out about his grave illness. His doctor kept prescribing different treatment regimens that brought little relief. Anyone else in Jared's position might have caused a scene and demanded answers. But Jared was unusually reticent when it came to medical issues and felt uneasy whenever he was in the doctor's office. A wave of weakness overwhelmed Jared again. He lost his balance, stumbled off the sidewalk and fell onto the road. His consciousness began to blur as he heard the loud horns of passing cars. Then he heard a squeal and a large dark object appeared before him. "Hey, man, where did you get so much since morning that you've had enough of life? Why are you throwing yourself under the wheels like a madman?" asked a rough male voice in his ear. Jared looked up and only now saw that a metre away from him stood a yellow bus, the body of which was slightly turned from such a sharp braking. "I'm sorry, please. It's my illness," he replied in a weak voice. The bus driver leaned over him, exclaiming in surprise, "Well, you look sober. Let me help you. Can you stand up, or should I call an ambulance?" Jared waved his hands in protest. "No, there's no need for doctors. I just got out of the hospital myself. I'll walk. I feel better already." The driver grunted and quickly helped Jared up. Suddenly, Jared felt a strong urge to thank the kind man. He reached into his pocket and, to his disappointment, found no cash, just bank cards. What good were they without a terminal? A solution came to mind. He removed his watch and offered it to the bus driver. "Here, take it, please. But don't refuse, okay? It's for your concern, and the fact that you haven't driven over me, although I'd rather the other option." The bus driver was taken aback and hesitated. "Easy, man, don't overreact. It's a nice watch, keep it. You've got a nice watch, you'll need it. I'm sure you didn't buy it for pennies." But Jared insisted. "No, really, take it. I give it from the heart. I won't need it any more." After a moment, the driver accepted it. "Thanks, man. Don't be too hard on yourself and stay strong. Remember, stress causes all kinds of diseases," he called out as he drove off. Jared waved back and slowly walked towards his home. His apartment building, a towering luxury high-rise, was visible from a distance. With a whopping 30 stories, underground parking, a private playground, and a small pool with a gym, it was a symbol of elite living. Waking up to a panoramic city view was usually a joy. But today Jared wasn't thrilled. He nodded to the guard in the lobby and headed towards the elevator. But before he could press the elevator button, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Brown, wait, please." Jared turned to see a guard, around his own age, rushing towards him. "Yes, I'm listening," Jared responded respectfully. Despite his status, he stuck to informal language with the guard. In his belief, everyone held an equal standing, but had different roles. Some handled business, while others ensure the residents' peace in a high-rise. "Mr. Brown, here's the thing. Could you possibly help me with a job?" The guard began, panting. Surprised, Jared asked, "What's the matter? You're not happy with your post at the security desk?" The uniformed man hesitated. "Well, this job is not bad. It's warm, quiet, and the tenants are reasonable. I just monitor the surveillance camera and maintain order." Jared looked at his interlocutor pointedly, urging him to get to the point. "Enough beating around the bush. Let's get to the main issue." The guard sniffed, then continued. "It's a good job, I'm not complaining, but the pay is low. My 2-year-old son needs an operation on his leg. We're in line for a treatment quota, but it's taking time and we can't wait. The doctors are urging us to act, so we need the money." The businessman nodded sympathetically. "How can I help? I may donate towards the operation. Give me the clinic's details and I'll make a transfer. I might not be able to cover the full cost, but I'll contribute as much as I can." The guard's spirits lifted and his voice changed in tone. "Thank you, Mr. Brown, but I'd like to work at your firm. I heard you have security services. If you need people, I'm ready. I have some experience as a gamekeeper as well." This intrigued Jared, and he momentarily forgot his discomfort. "A gamekeeper, you say? Interesting. Why did you become a guard, then?" The guard averted his eyes. "Well, I'm a former convict, actually. There was an accident during a hunt. Some wealthy men shot at each other while drunk. They all survived, but they pinned the blame on me. I thought I'd get promotion or a year at most, but they gave me 5 years. I served 2 to 3 of my sentence and got out on parole. The prison warden helped me get this job. Without his help, I wouldn't have been hired as a guard. And now, there's the issue with my son." Jared frowned. "I see. I'll think about it, but still give me the clinic's details. I'll go up to my apartment now and make the transfer right away. I don't mind hiring you, but my business partner is very sensitive about hiring former convicts." Tears glistened in the guard's eyes. "Thank you. I'll be forever obliged." Jared merely waved his hand and pressed the elevator button. He was not such a benefactor or a hero. Not at all. He had his flaws like anyone else. But children were his weakness. "How can you not help the security guard's son? The kid is only 2 years old. He could end up lame for life. And children are the future," Jared thought. Arriving at his apartment door, Jared took out the keys from his pocket. One of them, the oldest and most worn, made him shudder. It was the key to his mother's house, where she lived alone, abandoned by everyone, including her own son. Shaking off the unpleasant memory, Jared inserted the key into the lock and turned it counterclockwise. The apartment smelled pleasantly of something fried. It smelled delicious, and Jared smiled. "Oh, nice. Chelsea ordered food from the restaurant," Jared thought with pleasure. Then he heard voices. There were 2 of them, a male and a female, coming from the bedroom. One was his wife Chelsea's, but the other one... Vincent? What's he doing here? He and Chelsea can't stand each other. This thought raced through Jared's mind as he opened the door to the bedroom. The reality was unpleasant. While he had heard about such incidents in acquaintances' stories, witnessing it firsthand was a different story. Chelsea and Vincent were lying together, openly discussing their future. Jared even managed to discern the word wedding in their conversation. His blood boiled with anger at the sight. However, Vincent, noticing Jared in the doorway, only nonchalantly gestured towards a chair. "Sit down, Jared. Don't lose your cool." "There's no need for a scene, Jared. Vincent and I love each other and want to get married." Chelsea added with a languid smile. "I'll wipe you out," Jared hissed, grimacing from the intense pain at the back of his head. "Oh, come on. It's funny to hear from the man who is with one foot in his grave. Consider your own position. By the way, you've no place in business anymore. I held a private shareholders' meeting yesterday and you've been removed from your position because of your illness. So, return to your village swamp," Vincent said arrogantly. Jared's face twisted, a malicious glint in his eyes. "Leave my apartment before I kick both of you out like unruly kittens." Chelsea grinned, twirling a fiery red curl around her finger. "Jared, what a bad day you are having today. Everything you say is incorrect. The apartment is registered as a wedding present for me. Have you forgotten? Your official residence is in the country, right? So now, pack your things and leave." Defeated on all fronts, Jared waved his hand in resignation and wandered into the room that had been his office for several years. He was to fulfill a promise he had made to the guard. The businessman leisurely pulled out his cell phone from his pocket, calling to the bank. After brief negotiations, the necessary funds were transferred to the account of the hospital performing the boy's operation. Jared transferred the money almost automatically, not hesitating for a moment. He didn't care, as long as he could leave the dreaded apartment quickly. However, the cheerful voices of Chelsea and Vincent from the bedroom continued to irritate him, causing him to clench his jaw in helplessness. Jared was in a terrible state. His head was spinning, his mouth was dry, and he was extremely thirsty. Unfortunately, there was no water in his study, and he didn't want to pass by the bedroom to get to the kitchen. He admitted to himself that he was acting cowardly in this situation. A real man would have confronted the lovers, shouting obscenities at the top of his lungs. But in his current state, he felt too weak. His hands slumped, and his lips were pressed into a single unbroken line. After packing his bag and everything he needed, Jared left the apartment, slamming the door loudly in farewell. What else could he do? Listen to their cheers or feel like a loser? No, that was enough. On the ground floor, the guard gave him a sympathetic look. "Did you know?" asked Jared despondently, and the guard nodded, looking away. "Then why didn't you tell me? Didn't you feel sorry for me?" "I did tell you. I wrote a letter to you and attached the video surveillance footage. I left all this in the mailbox," he explained. Jared shook his head in regret. "Oh, I've already forgotten when I last checked my mail, but it's pointless to fight now, when it's already over. Well, I'm leaving. I've arranged the payment to your son. 70% of the sum is paid. Just add a bit more and it's done," Jared said, and made his way to the door, wondering what to do next. His mind was screaming to start a battle with Vincent and Chelsea, but his heart was begging him to go back to where he had started. "If I leave now, Vincent will take all the business and won't even thank me. He had already managed to hold the shareholders' council secretly, and everyone is just waiting for me to die, and none other than Vincent will say a beautiful but deceitful farewell speech about me over my fresh grave. We started together 7 years ago as newcomers. I left everything in my village, my work, my parents, house, and above all my mother, and went to conquer the city. Instead of talking to my mother, telling her my point of view, convincing her that I didn't belong in the village, I ran away to the city with all her money. I don't remember why I was afraid to tell the truth about leaving, and after I ran away I was ashamed. Yes, it was an ugly act. I took all her savings from the box and ran away in the dark night. Yes, this situation is the punishment for my heinous deed. 7 years have passed, and it seems like yesterday. Then I didn't know what awaited me, whether I could settle down and achieve something in a big city. But I did. I worked hard in the office. I traded everything I could, and slowly climbed up the career ladder. Not by myself, of course, but with a friend in misfortune, Vincent. Yeah, he was always more cunning. I was climbing higher and higher, and Vincent was growing with me. And this is what it came to. On his way to the train station, Jared smiled to himself, recalling his journey in business. He didn't care if passers-by thought he was strange. They were entitled to their opinions. Jared decided to travel to his hometown by train. He had always enjoyed the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks, the scenery outside the window, and tea served by the obliging conductor. Unfortunately, his luck was out today. "No tickets! It's summer! Resort season! You should have booked in advance," the cashier said with visible irritation. "Perhaps there's something, maybe a connecting train," Jared pleaded. The cashier looked at Jared's pale face with reproach. "I said there's nothing. Do I have to repeat myself? I've already strained my voice twice. You're all like children, wanting everything." Jared nodded and stepped aside. An hour ago, he had a lot of money, but it was spent on the guard's son's treatment. However, he didn't regret it, considering it could be the last good deed of his life. "How am I supposed to get to my village now? There's not enough money for a cab. I'm too afraid to drive myself. I could easily get into an accident and hurt someone innocent," Jared thought wistfully. The only remaining option was the hitchhiking. Who has it easy nowadays? The main thing is for my mum to accept me, since we have not seen each other for 7 years. Jared tried to console himself. Jared had completely lost hope when luck finally shone on him in the form of a middle-aged truck driver. Seeing Jared standing by the roadside with a bag in his hands, the man opened the door and shouted from the truck cab, "Hey, where do you need to go?" Jared responded with a hint of uncertainty, and the driver's face spread into a broad smile. "Then we're on the same path. Get in." Joy lit up in Jared's eyes. "Finally, I have some good luck," he thought. The truck driver turned out to be a pleasant fellow, who entertained with tales from his life that sounded more like tall tales. Jared listened with half an ear, struggling to stay awake. The entire trip took about 5 hours, during which Jared could only think about one thing. How would his mother react to his return? Would she turn him away, remembering how he had stolen her hard-earned money? Why did I do such a despicable thing? Why did I steal from my own mother? You are a thief, Jared. A despicable, an insolent thief. Jared repeated to himself on the way home. The village, as often happens with such locations, was relatively far from the highway where the driver had left Jared. This meant that he, a businessman weakened by illness, had to carry his bag for at least a couple of kilometres under the scorching June sun. Jared smiled to himself and continued towards the village, using the dilapidated mill building as a landmark. Once it had been a bustling place, and his mother used to bake him pancakes using a fresh flour. She also made pies. Jared loved his mother's baked goods, simple, uncomplicated, yet incredibly tasty. Holding one of these pies, warm and exuding a heavenly aroma, was a delight. The light, porous dough made them almost weightless and easy on the stomach. You could eat a dozen in one sitting without feeling overly full. Jared tasted her delicious cooking for the last time 7 years ago, the day before he fled from home under the cover of darkness. Since then, he hadn't found anything as satisfying as his mum's home-cooked meals. Despite visiting various restaurants, serving foreign dishes and luxurious sauces, nothing compared to his mother's simple yet hearty meals. The bustling waiters, famous chefs, and stage singers seemed to offer an air of luxury and wealth, but they couldn't provide the comfort his soul craved. Nothing in life could match a dinner in the village after a hard day's work, where the table was laden with fresh produce from the garden, cucumbers, tomatoes, and buttered boiled potatoes. Recalling all this, Jared felt a pang of hunger. His mouth watered and his stomach rumbled. This is a good sign. When was the last time I had such an appetite? I can't recall. Perhaps Vincent was right, suggesting I retreat into the wilderness. Despite his betrayal, which is unforgivable, his advice was sound, Jared thought, quickening his pace. To his surprise, he found his steps becoming more assured, his thoughts clearer, his head no longer heavy as a cast-iron pot. It wasn't a cure, but given his unfortunate situation, it was the best thing that could happen to him that day. Even though it was well past noon, the air was not yet cool. Sweat dripped from Jared's face, a stark contrast to his usual air-conditioned car journeys. Now he had to return to his childhood home, where he had spent the best years of his life. I was such a fool. I chased money and lost more than I gained, including my mother's trust. Why did I ever leave my hometown? He asked aloud. The sound of his own voice against the rural backdrop felt unnatural and somewhat absurd. Suddenly, a peculiar squeaking sound resonated a few meters off the road. Jared paused and placed his bag on the sun-warmed ground. The peculiar squeak echoed again, propelling him towards the nearby wild rosehip bushes. Jared approached cautiously and circumvented the thorny bush, which sprawled out in all directions like a gargantuan spider. He peered closer and gasped in astonishment. Nestled in the grass was a fiery red creature. It was larger than a cat, yet smaller than a big dog. It's a fox cub, still young but quite sizable. What happened to it? Jared thought, reaching out to touch the russet creature. The fox cub shuddered, then whimpered pitifully, much like a child deprived of their favourite toy. Hey there, what's wrong with your paw? What's that attached to it? The man gently inquired, speaking as if the fox could comprehend his words. The auburn animal squeaked once more and attempted to lift its front paw, which held a glittering, odd object. A trap, flashed through Jared's mind. But how can I remove it? And what if the fox gets a hold of my hand? To protect himself, he took a shirt out of his bag and wrapped it around his arm. However, the precaution turned out to be unnecessary, because the fox endured the whole procedure of removing the trap, and at the end he licked Jared's hand. Wow, how kind! And they say that foxes are evil and cunning animals, Jared remarked with a smile. The red fox squeaked gratefully and tried to stand, but immediately fell on its side with a muffled groan. Hush, hush, where are you going so quickly? I'm not a vet, but I think your leg is broken. How about I take you with me? My mum is great at healing. She'll get you back on your feet, but you need to be patient. Can you bear it? Jared asked. The fox sneezed amusingly in response and looked at his saviour eagerly with his beady eyes. You're not a fool, I see. Well then, be patient, little one. Now, let's continue on our way. I'm going to put you in my bag, okay? But I won't close it. I don't want you to get too hot. I wish I had some water. I could really go for some well water right now to quench my thirst, Jared concluded, and carefully placed the little fox in the bag. The cub remained calm, only occasionally squeaking when Jared lifted the bag over a bump. Finally, the village appeared in the distance. Squat houses, wicker fences, and fences leaning to one side. From one end of the village, the distinct mooing of a cow could be heard. From the other, the clucking of hens and the pitiful bleating of goats. These sounds merged into a single hum, familiar only to someone who had spent their childhood in a beloved village. Jared knew he had to walk another 200 metres before the roof of his mother's house would come into view. Previously, a little dwelling stood there, but his late father and grandfather had expanded it to the size of a more substantial house. Jared's heart quickened at the sight. He could already see his mother's vegetable garden, with rows of potatoes planted a few months ago, and a small greenhouse containing tomatoes and peppers. A little further away stood a well, the water from which he had been craving for the past hour. We're almost there. See that gate? We'll open it soon and our adventure will be over," said Jared, patting the little fox on the head. Jared took a few steps towards the gate and stopped, taken aback. Near the fence stood 2 people. A skinny woman around 30 with a frightened expression, and a 7-year-old boy looking at everything with innate childlike curiosity. Upon seeing the tall man with a bag in his hands, they froze warily, particularly the woman. Mother and son, maybe. They look like homeless people, though I'm not far from them myself. I look similar, the businessman thought to himself. "Hello, sir. You're from this house, aren't you?" The boy broke the silence. "Yes, I am. However, I haven't been home in quite some time. About 7 years," replied Jared, embarrassed. At this moment, the sound of a door opening echoed, and the familiar silhouette of his mother appeared at the entrance of the house. "Jared, my boy, is that you? You've returned, my dear," Sarah exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. Startled, Jared turned pale and dropped the bag he was holding. At that moment, the little fox sitting inside it gave a pitiful yelp, which did not escape the boy's attention. "What's that sound coming from your bag? A toy? May I see?" Jared looked at the boy's mother. "It's a fox cub. I found it by the roadside with a trap on its foot and decided to save him." He couldn't finish because at that moment his mother went over to him and hugged him tightly. "You're here, Jared, my darling," she sobbed, embracing her son. Jared expected anything but this. How could Mum forget that I took her last money? However, Sarah wasn't thinking about that now. The most important thing was her son's return. For 7 long years she had waited for her favourite boy to come home. Had she forgiven Jared for taking the money? Of course she had. After all, he was her only son, and money was just paper. It couldn't replace simple human joys. All this while, the strange woman and her boy stood aside, not knowing what to say or how to behave in this awkward situation. Finally, Sarah, having admired her son enough, turned her attention to the guests. "Good evening. Why are you standing there? Come into the yard. I don't bite. The whole neighbourhood knows me. I even leave the gate open during the day. People come for fresh milk, others for eggs. Everyone's welcome. Come in, dear guests, but please excuse me. I haven't seen my son for 7 years." Meanwhile, Jared took the furry creature out of the bag and sat him on his lap. The boy exclaimed, "Wow, how cute! What eyes! And the nose!" Jared smiled and scooped up water with his hand from a nearby bucket. He began to let the little fox drink. Sarah asked anxiously while examining the fox's paw, "Who did such a nasty thing to this creature? All the hunters in the village respect the law. They don't harm anyone except ducks in season." "I don't know, Mum. I found him by the roadside," Jared replied. "The trap was without a leash. Apparently the fox stepped into it somewhere else and then chewed the rope. He kept walking until it ran out of strength." "Can I treat his wound?" the boy's mother offered. Sarah looked at the guest with undisguised surprise. "Are you a veterinarian?" The woman coughed embarrassedly, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. "No, I'm a doctor, a general practitioner, but I know how to treat wounds. Animals, they're almost like people, only they can't talk." Sarah looked at her with respect, saying, "Great! I'll bring some bandages and soap." "Won't it hurt it?" The boy was concerned. Sarah smiled and reassured him. "No, we'll be careful. Your mum and I will even blow on the wound, so the little fox won't feel a thing." Jared watched the unfolding events in disbelief. Just yesterday, he was in a stuffy office, reprimanding his employees, and now he was sitting near his village house with his mother and an unfamiliar woman with her curious son. As it became clear a little later, her name was Anne, and her son was Zack. They had travelled from the same city as Jared. Anne shared that they had chanced upon the village. They had left the highway, spotted a signpost, and decided to ask for a night's stay. Why they chose Sarah's homestead, they couldn't explain. Most likely the house of the kind-hearted woman smelled of hospitality, which eventually determined the choice of this strange couple. Jared found Anne reserved and quiet. While tending to the fox's wound, she continually looked around, as if expecting an attack. They had brought even fewer personal belongings than Jared. Were they in such a hurry that they couldn't even pack? That's strange. He didn't know the answer to that question, nor did he know if he had any right to ask this modest woman, who was he himself, by the way, a bankrupt businessman on the run, a man who had lost his home and his wife. Anne quickly treated the fox's wound, and then skillfully applied a tidy splint made from a small stick and a piece of elastic bandage. "In a week or two you'll be as good as new," she said, smiling. "Your hands are magic. The fox cub didn't even flinch. If you decide to stay in the village, you won't starve. We need a medical specialist at the clinic," Sarah said, respect evident in her voice. "Oh, thank you. In fact, I was worried and was afraid to hurt the fox." Anne brushed off the compliment. After they stood outside for a while longer, Sarah invited everyone into her house. "Come on in, I've set the table. We've got potatoes, fried fish, and pies with apple jam. All the vegetables are from my garden. No chemicals. My neighbour caught the fish yesterday. He doesn't eat it himself. He says he enjoys the process. He's such a good fisherman. You won't find another like him." Jared allowed Anne and her son to proceed, and he himself stayed in the doorway to apologise to his mother for everything. For his theft, for indifference and 7 years of uncertainty. However, Sarah had already guessed his intention. She affectionately dismissed his apology. "No need, Jared. The past is the past. There's no need to rehash it. You're my son and I'm your mum. I knew you had a good heart and that someday you'd come back and everything would be okay." Her words stirred confusion in Jared's heart. "Thanks, Mum. If you knew how much I regret what I did, and how I was afraid to come back and look you in the eye. You know, Mum, I'm very ill. The doctors have already conducted 100 tests, but the treatment isn't working yet." "Don't take it to heart, son. At home, you know, the walls heal. Go to the woods for mushrooms and berries. Drink some clear water. Afterward, you'll see what to do next. Let's eat before everything gets cold. The potatoes are delicious," said Sarah, leading the way across the threshold. Jared nodded and closed the door behind him. The small kitchen smelled divine. Zack, hungry from the day, eagerly tapped a spoon on the bottom of his soup bowl, ensuring not to miss a single morsel. Anne was eating more discreetly, but with equal enthusiasm. "So, do you like the village meal or not?" the hostess asked with a smile. "Of course, it's delicious," Zack answered on behalf of everyone. The sight of the splendid spread on the table brought tears to Jared's eyes. It was probably nostalgia, a longing for his homeland, which he had been stubbornly repressing for 7 long years. After dinner, Jared went outside to sit on a bench and think over his next steps. His phone buzzed in his pocket, signalling the arrival of a text message. Jared scowled, because the sender was Chelsea, who informed him that she had filed for divorce and was actively preparing for a wedding with Vincent. Jared smirked and texted back, "Wish you love and good luck." For some reason, he felt no anger towards Chelsea. To live and witness your husband's decline is difficult to endure. Chelsea had always been a woman with ambition and high expectations, and Jared had simply not lived up to them. What more could he say? Sitting on the bench, Jared patted the little fox and pondered his health. He was determined not to abandon treatment, but decided to stop taking the various mixtures and pills. The side effects were exacerbating his condition, proving to be far worse than the disease's symptoms themselves. He enjoyed sitting on the bench at his parents' house. The bench was a testament to his father's craftsmanship. Whether it was creating wooden items for the house or carving miniature toys and animal figures, his father was truly skilled. "I should take a walk in the forest tomorrow, perhaps with the fox. The exercise would do us good," Jared thought, heading back to the house in the pitch dark. Anne and Zack were already asleep in the guest room. Only Sarah was awake, sitting in the living room and reading the book. "Mum, I plan to get up early tomorrow. I'm thinking of taking the fox cub and Zack to the woods. They don't know yet, it'll be a surprise. Please wake me up early so I can prepare. Could you also fill up a thermos with food for us?" Jared requested, standing in the doorway. Sarah smiled, adjusting her glasses as she nodded. "Okay, Sonny, I'll definitely wake you up, and I'll give you some milk for the road to eat with bread." Jared looked at his mother with affection, promising himself he would never leave her alone. As soon as his head hit the pillow, sleep overtook him so quickly. It was as if he was in the arms of Morpheus. Jared's dreams were vivid but unsettling. He dreamt of Chelsea's wedding. Vincent was uncorking a bottle of champagne amidst raucous laughter. Their guests were smiling, and the newlyweds were inseparable. In his dream, the wedding of Chelsea and his former companion seemed lavish to Jared. It made sense, as Vincent was not a fool, quickly figuring out how to turn a profit. Only God knew how much money he had siphoned from the company account. Jared had often been told by his friends and colleagues, "Trust but verify." He should have set up surveillance cameras in his partner's office. Then he would have known everything happening within the office walls. But what use were these thoughts now? It was too late anyway. Meanwhile, Sarah went to bed well past midnight, spending about an hour praying for her beloved son's health. She could see that Jared had become very thin, a shadow of his former self. This business has really worn him out. He works relentlessly without any rest. He could have chosen to stay here and teach foreign languages at school, as suggested. But he didn't. He pursued the money. This pursuit drained his remaining strength. His luck wasn't any better with his wife. She learned about the wedding by chance when someone from the neighbourhood spotted a photo on the back page. It was Jared arm in arm with his bride. How could the neighbour not show such a photo to the whole village? Soon the local gossip mongers started mocking Sarah, saying, "What a great mother! She raised a son who didn't even invite his own mother to his wedding." Of course, Sarah didn't tell anyone about the missing money from her jewellery box. She felt protective of her son, hoping that he would come to his senses and return. For 7 long years she had been waiting. Now she was sure that her son's life would get better. Jared woke up the next morning to the crowing of the neighbour's rooster. "Oh, what's the point of crowing this early? I'll let my fox pay you a visit. He'll silence your heavenly voice," muttered a sleepy Jared, shaking his fist. Anne was already on her feet, busily helping Sarah with household chores. "And from afar, you can't tell that she's a city girl," Jared thought respectfully, and went outside to wash his face with well water, cold and sweet at the same time. Although his illness was still present, its symptoms had somewhat subsided, as if he had taken a hefty dose of painkillers. Upon learning that Jared was planning a forest trip to gather mushrooms and berries, Anne decided to join him and Zack along with their fox. Before they set off, Sarah handed Jared a package, saying, "Take this. It contains eggs, potatoes, and chicken ham. I'll add some milk and apple pies. Zack loved them so much yesterday." Jared objected. "Mum, this is enough food for a whole week. And Zack and I couldn't eat all this in a month." "Take it, Jared, and don't argue," she insisted. "You'll see, it won't be enough." Resignedly, Jared accepted the package. He didn't want to upset his mother by refusing the food she had lovingly prepared. Zack woke up to a delightful surprise. A walk in the real forest with his mother and his new friend Jared. It felt like a fairy tale. Jared assumed the role of a guide. He led the group out of the village and towards the forest. The fox cub, due to his injury, was tucked away in his bag, observing the world with his usual calmness and caution. The locals looked at Jared with reproach. There he is, the former schoolteacher. All he wanted was to go to the city, but what's the use? He's pale as a ghost. He doesn't look like himself. Jared felt their negativity, but responded by simply lowering his eyes and continuing to march forward. Upon reaching the forest, Jared seemed to relax. Now there's no need to lower my eyes in shame. The forest, like a father, is always ready to help to comfort. The fir tree branches are waving welcomingly, and the birds are chirping, like a welcoming hostess awaiting her husband's return from the plough. Sensing the power radiating from the dark greenery, Jared asked cautiously, Anne, why did you and Zack move to the village? You're city folks, aren't you? She sighed sadly. Yes, Jared, you're right, but we had no other choice. Zack isn't my relative. His parents died in an accident, and his grandfather raised him from the age of 2. I was his grandfather's doctor. Mr. Shewell ran a successful business almost single-handedly. His son and daughter-in-law were his hope, but they met an unfortunate fate. He outlived them all, including his wife, who was severely ill and passed away before the children. A few months ago, Mr. Shewell fell sick, experiencing morning weakness and nausea. I tried to treat him, but he had no time because of his business. He surrounded himself with bad people, greedy, cruel. They had their eyes on his fortune. What does an elderly man in his old age need? Care and attention. Those scoundrels provided the businessman with everything. They said we would carry you in our arms, but make a will for us to be your grandson's counsellors. When Zack grows up, he'll get it all at once. They said it would be a contribution to his future, and the boy would not go to an orphanage and stay with the guardian, Anne continued. And did he believe? It sounds like a lie. Jared couldn't contain himself. Anne shook her head regretfully. It's clear to you, Jared, but Mr. Shewell seized any opportunity without thinking, just to secure his grandson's future. I visited his house many times and saw the direction things were heading. And then he was gone. And according to the will, all the finances went to these guardians, right? Jared asked again. Well, not quite. The house and real estate did go to the crooks, but that's just a drop in the ocean. The main capital is in the bank, and only Zack can access it because he memorized the secret code. When Mr. Shewell passed away, I secretly took Zack to my house. I accidentally overheard the true plans of those people. They were going to pocket the money and then just send the boy to a third-rate closed institution. They were going to pocket the money and then send the boy to a third-rate closed institution. They're searching for us, Jared. That's why we decided to hide in the village for a while and think about what to do next. Anne explained, instinctively looking over her shoulder. Yes, what a situation. In general, I think you should go to the police, but you can stay with us as long as you need to. There's plenty of room in the house. My mother won't mind. You know, I've been feeling bad myself. I was seen by a renowned doctor in the city, but to no avail. Weakness, dizziness, nausea, Jared said, genuine sympathy in his voice. Thank you for your support. Forgive me for asking, but who did you see? What's the doctor's name? You know, I'm not uninformed about the medical world, Annie asked, furrowing her brow. Dr. Leonetti, Jared replied without hesitation. Dr. Ben Leonetti, she clarified in disbelief. Well, yes. Is there a problem? Annie suddenly paled and her expression changed. "Jared, you might not be aware, but Ben Leonetti lost his medical license 2 years ago. It was a huge scandal. He couldn't have treated you last month." Surprised, Jared nearly dropped the bag holding the fox cub. "So I was treated by a quack?" Anne sighed sadly, gesturing with her hands. "And the medicine you were given was something bad or useless. In fact, you need a CAT scan." As Jared walked through the forest, he couldn't believe he had been deceived all this time. And it was Chelsea who had recommended this doctor and his clinic to him. Suddenly, everything became so. That's why Chelsea and Vincent insisted I get treatment from this doctor. Shaking his head, Jared led his new acquaintances into the forest, towards a glade known for its abundance of mushrooms. "Wow, what a beautiful mushroom! Look, it's red!" exclaimed Zack, rushing towards a large mushroom with a cap covered in strange speckles. "No, no, dear, that's a fly agaric. Don't touch it, throw it away," Anne shouted, moving between the boy and the mushroom. Jared smiled and continued their search for edible mushrooms. Step by step they went deeper and deeper into the forest, not even realizing that at this very moment a huge black SUV appeared in the village. The strangers in the vehicle stopped at each house, looking for a young woman and a 7-year-old boy. The village residents reacted with unease to their presence. When the ominous vehicle stopped at Sarah's house, the 3 strangers got out, opening the gate. Sarah immediately sensed trouble, recalling the peculiar behaviour of her guests. She locked the door with the deadbolt and promptly dialed the local police. "Hey, lady, weren't you welcoming your guests?" a rough male voice called from the street. "Oh, I just got a little distracted. I'll be right there," she said in a deliberately affectionate tone. Sarah was doing this to detain the men before the arrival of the policeman, who had already called all those who could help in the arrest. Rattling iron, she showed with all her looks that she could not open the unyielding deadbolt. But for the bandits, who persistently followed the trail of the young heir, it did not matter. A powerful blow to the area of the lock, and the door flew off its hinges with a nasty creak. Sarah fell on her back, and the men were already busily rummaging through the bag, so recklessly left by Anne on the chair. "Here's the proof, boss." "They were definitely here," shouted one of the leader's underlings. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Her deception was exposed. In an hour and a half, Jared and Anne could return home, and here would be a skillfully disguised ambush waiting for them. However, the raiders overlooked one thing: the solidarity of the villagers. They had promptly responded to the district police officer's call and armed themselves with pitchforks, shovels, and anything else they could find. They began to tighten their circle around Sarah's house. Initially, the raiders used threats of retribution and prosecution. However, upon realizing they were cornered, they attempted to escape. Naturally, they were apprehended and taken to the district station in their own vehicle. During interrogation, it was revealed that the 3 detainees were wanted for a string of robberies targeting solitary, elderly individuals. So, thanks to Sarah's quick thinking, the criminals were arrested and Anne and Zack could resume their normal lives. But despite everything, the doctor chose not to return to the city, opting instead to stay in the welcoming home. To Jared's great relief, his ailment vanished as quickly as it came, once Anne prescribed him a suitable, gentle treatment. As it was later revealed, Chelsea and Vincent had conspired with the discredited doctor to deceive Jared with ineffective medicine. The aim of the conspirators was simple: to take the wary businessman out of the game, to take over his business and apartment. Upon discovery of the deceit, Chelsea and Vincent were detained on the same day and were facing a rigorous investigation and potential criminal punishment. However, this hardly concerned Jared, who, after divorcing his ex-wife, planned to start a new life with Anne and their adopted son Zach. The inheritance from the boy's late grandfather would be saved until Zach's adulthood. Jared rebuilt his business and things slowly started to get better. But the most important for him was that he had finally found the love and happiness he had sought for 7 years. Sarah was confident that her son would have nothing to fear with such a loving wife. And why should he, when their home was watched over by a clever fox?